The perceptive among you will realise that I've done this tag before, but we can pretend like I'm some sort of fantasy author with middling talents who've had one good idea, and we're going to ride that cash train for all the dollars they're worth, at least until the author comes out against some sort of minority group. It's the mid-year freakout tag, volume 4. And I asked Nell to come back and make a cameo appearance with me, and she said she's never been friends with Sarah Jessica Parker. I'm not really sure what that means. Let's get into the questions. I've looked up an old version of this tag, and in that tag, I skipped a whole bunch of questions. So I assume I had good reason for doing it then, and I'm not going to justify doing it now. This is the abridged version. Best book you've read so far this year. I was really struggling to answer this question when I first looked at this tag. I was thinking about books like Wade in the Water, Chain Gang All-Stars, In Memoriam, I'm a Fan, Magma, and I was sort of justifying how picking a favourite wouldn't bring me joy, and it would just kind of like be a real estate agent listing the features of a property. You know they're not going to be same the second time you ask them. But I just finished When Things Are Alive, They Hum by Hannah Bent, and it's gone straight to number 1. Last book I finished. I've not discussed this book in a single video yet. I literally finished it today. It's about two sisters, one a PhD student, the other has Down syndrome, or as she calls it, Up syndrome. She also has a terminal heart defect and needs a heart transplant or she will die, hence it been terminal. And this has been denied to her for a variety of complex reasons, which really all boil down to her having Down syndrome. And for me, this brought up these complex ideas around what kind of life is worth living, what kind of life is worth saving, who contributes to society, and prejudice against people with Down syndrome and other mental handicaps. However, the novel is so much more than that. They consider going to China in order to get a heart. China, as it turns out, has a booming organ donor tourism market. Who knew? Certainly not me. But then ask yourself, why when Hong Kong can't get any donors, China can attract tourists in that industry? It certainly presents an ethical dilemma, and that dilemma feeds back into this idea of who contributes to society and what it means. And then there is the theme of trauma that's in this. Both sisters have had to deal with losing their mother several years earlier, and that then resurfaces with this terminal illness. The resentment towards their father's new girlfriend, the idea of family, and into that idea of family, Harper, the girl with Down syndrome, wants to marry her boyfriend, somebody else who has Down syndrome. That presents an issue within itself. She also doesn't want a heart transplant because she's worried that she won't love her boyfriend after it, or her sister, or her father. And she is vocal in her rejection of a heart transplant, but she doesn't understand what it means and what is best for her. There are real questions of when we should listen to a patient and when we should do what is best for them. It's such an incredible book. Question 3. New releases you haven't read yet, but you want to. I mean, like all of them. But The Memory of Animal by Claire Fuller stands out as a book I want to prioritize getting to. Genevieve Novak's Crushing, Nisha Doolan's The Happy Couple are things I'm interested in, but this question is getting dangerously like a TBR video. Most anticipated release in the second half of the year. I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to say that the second half of the year doesn't sound as good as the first. I could say that maybe not every book has been announced yet, and we'll get all the details filled in soon. But let's face fact, book sales are higher in the first half of the year, and publishers know that, and they only publish hack authors in the second half of the year. I'm of course only joking when I call authors hack, but I'm not joking about publishing houses front-loading the front half of the year with quality releases. Something I really am looking forward to is Nightbloom by Peace Adzu-Mendi, who wrote His Only Wife. That is about two cousins in Ghana who grew up as best friends, but then class and a chance moving to the US pulled them apart. It just sounds like a good book from an author who I know is talented. Question 5. Biggest disappointment. Capitalism, where's my white picket fence? Biggest surprise? No, okay, I'll answer the biggest disappointment question in a bookish way. Greek Lessons by Han Kang. I've seen Roz over at Skelly Dandling really loved this book, which usually means I've not appreciated something about a book and that it's actually excellent. But I thought it was a real shell of a novel. And regarding the biggest surprise, I think I've really already answered that with my favourite book of the year, When Things Are Alive, They Hum. So instead, I'm just going to say Pod getting shortlisted for the Woman's Prize. I know, a non-shady answer will be Tessa Dare when a Scott ties the knot. I read this for my reading BookTuber's favourite novels of 2022, and Charlotte from Coiny Reads loved this book, and I think she was surprised by it too. It was that small level of shock that she had that really tempted me to include it in that video, and it tempted me to read it, that it forced her to reconsider what she liked in a book, and I just thought it was wonderful. Favourite author, new or debut author to you? There are very few authors that I have read more than one book from this year, and to be a favourite author, you need a good book, and then you need to confirm it. So an author like Sheena Patel, I'm going to gobble up her next book. I'm going to read whatever she wants to write. But I only have a sample size of one, so she's not a favourite author. But there is one author I have read 2 books from who does stand out as a quality author, and that is Daniel Black. I've read 2 of his novels. I especially loved Don't Cry For Me. It's the novel of a dying father who has rejected his gay son, and he's writing him a letter apologising to him and explaining why he did what he did, telling him about the homophobia he grew up with, and telling his son that he actually loves him. It's a bit, emotional. Fictional crush. How could you ask such a question? I'm a happily married man. How dare you? I will, however, say that the protagonist from I'm a Fan, I could spend a lot of time trapped in her mind. Also, Maddie from Marmee, I just couldn't help but want to see her happy. Favourite fictional character? This is essentially the same as the last question, isn't it? So I'm just going to share with you a really interesting fact. Hippos sweat pink. That's a true fact. It's not my favourite character in a book, but I think we're all happier with that answer to the question. A book that made you cry. Look, water just doesn't come out of my face when I read. It's not a thing that happens. I'm sorry, I'm a horrible person and I'm a dried up husk of a human. It doesn't actually mean that I'm emotionally crippled or something. I feel sad when I read all the time. I just don't get watery. In Memoriam was a really excellent emotional roller coaster because it made me feel sad for people who had seen so much trauma that their emotions ended up being broken, that they couldn't process their emotions and they couldn't feel love, and they had to learn to feel again after seeing so many horrible things in the war. I mean, obviously there were events that were quite sad in that, but the character depiction was, for me, the sad part. It was really moving. I'll also say that Magma, it's a depiction of a toxic relationship, and the woman in it is suffering, and the more you get to know about her character and what is wrong with her, the more horrible and depressed you feel. It's a really fabulous novel. Books that made you happy. I mean, the last 2 books I mentioned, yeah? I think Marmee really worked for me. It made me feel both happy and sad at different points, but Maddie was a fictional character that was just so easy to like and support and feel her wins every time something good happened to her. It was just like a little celebration, a little woohoo! What is the favourite video that you have made? I'm going to give you 2 answers here. The first one is the video that took me the most research and the most editing and just the most time to make, and that is Moby Dick a Romance? It's a video where I was able to find out something really, really interesting and put that together, and I really liked that level of research and what that added and how that was different to a lot of the booktube I see. As an idea has been floating around in my head for such a long time before I was able to put it together in a video format. The other video that I'm really proud of is for a completely different reason. One of my pet hates is people misunderstanding me, and I often don't get across my point as articulately as I would like, and people fill in the gaps, and I can be pretty easy to misunderstand at times. And then when you criticize something, some people often think you're asking for it to be cancelled, and I generally think that this fear of cancel culture is divorced from reality, and it's much more problematic than cancel culture itself. But aside from that, often criticism is about looking at better ways of doing things. Criticism is about flagging issues that need to be improved and not judging people. It's not always about calling for a boycott. So when I made my video about gender and the Woman's Prize, I was really worried that it would be taken in the wrong way and that it would upset people. And it didn't. And people were so positive in the comments section, and it made me feel like everybody understood what I was saying. And that just made me feel really happy that people got it. And that made me quite proud of my video because I was able to communicate accurately. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? I will almost certainly read the Booker Prize long list. I say almost certainly because we won't know what the long list is until August 1st, and then there's 6 weeks or 2 months after that date that books can still be released for and be eligible for the long list. So you just generally don't know how possible these things are until you know which books are long listed. I've been debating reading the Miles Franklin Award, but I don't really think there's enough interest in that for me. And for me, reading an entire awards long list, that doesn't improve my reading. But what I enjoy about that is the speculation and the conversation and making the video at the end of that. And with those things, I just don't think there's the desire there for the Miles Franklin that would make that rewarding for me. I have a whole video worth of classics I said I wanted to read in 2023 about 6 months ago, and have I made progress on that? Well, yes, but not nearly enough. I will join in Victober. I have a couple of reading projects that I want to do, a couple of projects I always make. Other than that, I'll just continue to read new releases, and I'll try and read a few more books from Africa and India, as I love books from those two places. They're just such diverse places full of so many different cultures and ideas and people. I also might want to have a look at some books from Eastern Europe and from the Central Asian region. They're areas that I don't tend to read very many books from. So that's sort of my reading plans for the next 6 months. That's the Media Freakout tag. If nothing else, I hope that you learnt something about hippos today. Bye bye.